Journeys are the backbone of stories. The act of traveling from one place to another, whether it be a tangible or intangible location, is what a lot of the most popular and praised stories revolve around. This concept is tailor-made with a medium like video games, like with Nintendo's Legend of Zelda series. These games are often considered the big event adventures in gaming, whether it be Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild, and more. While I like Zelda games, I hesitate to call myself the biggest fan of the series. They're fun games to play and have some truly excellent characters, but I've always personally had a hard time getting into more basic fantasy settings. I need a twist or some extra sauce to truly find the fantasy basics interesting, and in video games, Zelda is the most basic of basic fantasy stories. Probably a big reason I actually appreciate Breath of the Wild's lore is because of all the extra tech elements introduced and all the shakeups to the franchise's formula. However, my actual favorite games in the series are the ones that aren't about going on a traditional heroic journey, but what happens after a world-saving quest, which I always find super interesting in stories. I love narratives that always talk about what's next after the big world-saving plot, as they usually delve into more personal character drama, which I love. And those two games are Link's Awakening and Majora's Mask, which both continue the archetypical hero's journey, but in bizarre, creative, and even heartbreaking ways. In Link's Awakening, this game sees Link getting shipwrecked on a mysterious island, presumably after he defeats Ganon in Link to the Past. This is one of the first Zelda games to not be set in Hyrule, instead on this island with a dark secret connected to the giant egg. Rather than saving the world, Link has to save himself, but his kind heart does lead him, and by extension the player, to get attached to the island's residents, who are some of the more fun and wholesome group of side characters in any Zelda game. The stakes for a majority of Link's Awakening are shockingly low for any Zelda game, which does fit the portable Game Boy it was originally released on. You still fight monsters and traverse dungeons, but for the most part, they aren't harming the residents of the island. It's all nature and humans living together quite comfortably, with the only disturbance being you, the player. Link's Awakening uses these initial low stakes to hit you with one of the most famous plot twists in this series, as spoilers for a nearly 30-year-old Game Boy game, but the island is all a dream, specifically the Windfish's dream that you managed to stumble into. The developers of Link's Awakening have openly admitted they were inspired by David Lynch's Twin Peaks and its dreamlike mysteries, which is a bit of a wild pull for an action-adventure game like Zelda, but I think it worked to give the story of Link's Awakening so much more open-endedness to analyze and discuss compared to its peers. For example, my personal interpretation for the dream world of Link's Awakening is a sort of meta-commentary on the Zelda series and fictional stories as a whole. Even if these characters aren't real, mere figments made up by someone else to motivate the player for the game's runtime, we still get attached and think about them. Sometimes they even impact us in small and big ways in the real world. At the time, Link's Awakening could be seen as an experimental risk for the series, but what was the Game Boy if not an experimental system? So a game like this was perfect for the time. What could have been just a handheld port of Link to the Past became so much more because the developers asked, okay, what's next? And took that concept to an interesting place. Side note before we move on to Majora's Mask, if you look at who actually made Link's Awakening, so many of these developers like Tezuka, Koizumi, and Tanaba have gone on to major positions at the company in the Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 eras, even appearing on Nintendo Directs. Good for them! As for Majora's Mask, this is widely considered to be one of the darkest and most tragic Zelda games in the series. I find a lot of time when people hype up a piece of media as the darkest entry in a franchise, it kinda gets overblown, but I think it's warranted with Majora's Mask. This game sees the Link from Ocarina of Time find himself in the topsy-turvy world of Termina, where he must consistently repeat the 3-day cycle in order to collect items and figure out how to stop the Skull Kid's angry mood from crashing down on the world. Throughout the 3-day cycles, there's always a sense of dread and panic from the citizens as they attempt to live their lives in the midst of the tragedy that plagues the land. The great thing about the time loop premise is that the creators were able to use the natural limitations of video game development to make the residents of Termina have full-on routines that you can interact and observe, which does wonders to ground the setting and emotions despite the wacky fantasy elements. Another thing I appreciate about Majora's Mask is that Link isn't destined to save the world from the Moon Doom. He's just stumbled on this place while looking for a near and dear friend. He's seen the horrors of the world, but even without the great expectations of being the hero of time, he still helps out because it's the next right thing to do. This ties into why Majora's Mask has so many side quests compared to the rest of the series. You could just do the basic 4 dungeons and call it a day, but not only will you miss out on a ton of upgrades and items, you'll miss out on so many amazingly told story events that help give pathos to the doomed people of Termina. I'd argue in Majora's Mask, the main game is the side quest, not just because the majority of the contents of the game lie there, but because that's where so much of the game's storytelling brilliance comes in. Despite the time manipulation causing people to forget your actions, each major quest line you finish will let you keep an item for the rest of the game, the equipable mask to help you memorialize the feelings that quest presented. If you get all the masks by the end of the game, you'll also get the bonus Fierce Deity mask for the final boss, which makes it a cakewalk as you unleash everyone's love, anger, and sorrow against the entity of despair itself. A phenomenal way to reward the player both in gameplay and feelings. For me, Majora's Mask was one of the most memorable gaming experiences I ever had. At school, I'd play the game on my 3DS and meet up with friends at lunchtime to discuss the game as they helped me figure out how to do the side quests. It was a fun time, yet those memories have a bittersweet tint to them as I don't have contact with any of those people anymore. Those moments are nothing but a memory that only I carry right now, similar to the mask given to Link. That experience is quite fitting for Majora's Mask, as the citizens of Termina, even if they don't know it, have affected me in a small but powerful way. And those are my favorite Zelda games, the games that ask, what's next after the big Ganon-slaying adventure? These games dare to expand the franchise beyond Hyrule into strange but memorable and sentimental stories. While a part of me wants Nintendo to make more Zelda games that appeal to my sensibilities, another part of me is just happy to have Majora's Mask and Link's Awakening in my life. I don't need to engross myself in every single Zelda game, I could just pick the ones I like.